In this video, I will cover everything you need to know to play a Feral Druid in Cataclysm Classic PvP. I will teach you everything from setting up your character with gear and talents, to advanced tips, macros, and Weakauras. This guide is specific to 3v3 arena, but most of this information does also apply to 2v2, RBGs, dueling, or any other form of PvP. Let's begin. Feral Druids are a very strong spec in Cataclysm. Overall, I'd put it in S tier, slightly below Rogues. It's extremely beginner friendly and only has a medium skill cap, making it the perfect class for beginners and rank 1 players alike. Compared to other melee classes in Cataclysm, Feral provides medium burst, medium sustained damage, strong but proc based CC, and extremely high survivability. Feral is very momentum based, and it is important to stay offensive in order to keep bleeds and Predatory Swiftness procs rolling. Gearing for Feral Druids is a little more complicated than other classes. I'll explain why in a moment. First, in order to understand the gearing process, we must first understand the stat priority, which is agility, hit and spell pen cap, mastery, crit, haste. Now, it's very important to understand that in PvP for Feral, mastery has absolutely insane value. Even for PvE, mastery is the best secondary stat, and on boss fights, you have to stand close to the boss and you have about 100% uptime, so you're always auto-attacking and you're never capping energy, so the damage profile is more even. In PvP, however, because of kiting and CC, you'll have less uptime on the target for shreds and autos, but the bleeds are always going to be ticking and always doing damage. Bleeds will always be your highest damage for this reason, therefore it is essential to stack as much mastery as possible. Okay, so here I have a Feral profile on 60 upgrades, and the link for this will be in the description for you to take a look yourself. This is the full Biz set. This set will require a lot of heroic raiding, so if that's not your cup of tea, I completely understand. Just make sure to at least get the trinket and the legs from Valor. These are the two highest value PvE pieces, and they are quite easy to obtain. Now in Cataclysm, all pieces of PvP gear will have resilience plus 1 secondary stat, while PvE pieces will have 2 secondary stats. Feral is passively the tankiest class in the game due to being literally a tank spec. So in order to optimize your gearing, you're going to want to sacrifice as much resilience as you can get away with in order to maximize your mastery. You can also use any other PvE gear that is not listed here, ideally anyone with hit and mastery and in a slot where the PvP alternative does not have mastery as an option. For example, the PvP legs here only have haste, which is awful itemization, and this is why we're going to be using the PvE legs. For reforging, first get your 5% hit cap and then stack as much mastery as possible. You can use an add-on like Reforge Lite to make this easier. Okay, now you can scroll down and see all the gems and enchants. I'm not going to go over each one individually, so just copy what I have here. Keep in mind you only need 3 spell pen gems if you're running the spell pen enchant on your cloak. If you have the tailoring enchant on your cloak, you need 4 spell pen gems. Which brings us into professions. You will always want to pick up tailoring for the cloak enchant proc, which gives you 1000 attack power. This is amazing because of bleed snapshotting, we will talk about later. For your second profession, you can either take engineering or a passive stat profession like jewel crafting or blacksmithing. Engineering gives the glove tinker for an on-use agility bonus, but keep in mind this cannot be used at the same time as your on-use trinket. Jewel crafting and blacksmithing give the same bonus of 80 total additional agility, though keep in mind once season 11 is out and epic gems are available, the value of jewel crafting is reduced, at which point you're going to want to be blacksmithing. Here are the talents. All the talents circled in green are mandatory, and you will have 4 flexible talents left over. The optional talents I have here circled in orange. You have 4 options for these. Fury Swipes when max 3 out of 3 will give you roughly 3 to 4% increased DPS in arena. It's not bad, but it's not great either. Feral Aggression will increase the damage of your Ferocious Bite by 10%, an ability you don't use too often, but it can be very impactful on big crits. Thick Hide gives you a little more tankiness in bear form, and here in Resto Tree, Perseverance gives you a little more spell damage reduction. Currently, I like to run 2 out of 2 Feral Aggression and put the last 2 into Thick Hide, but these points aren't super impactful, so do what you want here. For the glyphs, there is no room for preference, these are all set in stone. You want the prime glyphs of Berserk, Rip and Shred, major glyphs of Barkskin, Feral Charge and Pounce. For minor glyphs you want Dash and Mark of the Wild, and the third one doesn't matter at all for PvP, so just take whatever you want here. Now let's talk about races. Worgen gives 1% crit and Dark Flight, Night Elf gets Shadow Meld. Shadow Meld allows you to pounce in combat once every 2 minutes, which is extremely useful. You will also have an extra 1% chance for abilities to miss you even against people who are hit capped, so it's nice for a bit of extra RNG. For Hordes, Tauren is the best because you can War Stomp into Clone, but in Classic, 90% of the arena community is Alliance, so I would recommend playing Alliance Night Elf. Now for comps, the best comp you can run by quite a significant margin is Jungle Cleave, which is Feral, Hunter, Disc, or Shaman. Jungle Cleave is in fact overall the best comp in the game for Season 9. Other comps I've had success with are FLS, FMS, Kitty Cleave, and Rogue Feral. I will have a more detailed guide on Feral comps coming soon, so stay tuned for that. Damage rotation. Okay, remember before when I talked about the bleeds damage profile and the importance of mastery? Feral damage in PvP is heavily focused on bleeds, so the goal is to snapshot the biggest bleeds possible and extend it thanks to the Shred glyph. When you open on a target, you want to line up the Cloak proc, Trinket, and Tiger's Fury before you rip and rake to ensure those bleeds snapshot and get maximum value. Following the opener, keep an eye on procs and Tiger's Fury cooldown and always try to refresh your rip and rake while those are up. You want to prioritize Shred over Mangle, so try to be behind the target. But don't overthink this too much. If you're unable to get behind the target, just Mangle instead. Don't let your energy cap by trying too hard to Shred. Ferocious Bite can be really strong if used correctly and completely screw you over if it's used incorrectly. It has a low base energy cost but will eat up to 50 energy to do a bit of additional damage. This additional damage is really low value, so you never want to use this normally unless you're guaranteeing a kill, except for when Berserk is active. With the reduced energy cost of everything that Berserk provides, Bite becomes only 25 energy, and with your procs up, this can crit for upwards of 30k. So in the opener, after you've got your snapshotted rip off, your next 5 combo points, you can send 1 or 2 bites to provide great burst. A good rule of thumb is to never bite if you will not be able to maintain rip on the target. Alright, and now we move on to the Predatory Swiftness proc. Using this well is essential to Feral gameplay. This is a dispellable 6-second buff that you have a 20% chance per combo point of acquiring. In 3v3, you want to use this for Cyclone 99% of the time, but it can also be used for other spells like Healing Touch, Hibernate, or Roots. Now it's not as simple as get proc send clone, there are many counterplay strategies your enemies will use to prevent this. So Shamans have 2 ways of stopping the clone, and here I will go over a number of strategies to counter them. Grounding Totem is on a 30-second cooldown, and Purge is instant and spammable. Now since Feral is rarely focused in arena and your healer isn't putting trash buffs on you all the time, you will be clean for a majority of the game, making it super easy for the Shaman to dispel the proc. Most players these days will have a Weakauras that screams in their face, Feral proc when you get this, and will ground Purge instantly, so you have to be aware of this. When you rip, you 5 combo point rip and get the proc, you're going to go onto a global cooldown. So even if you play it perfectly, the enemies will have 1 second to get rid of your proc or ground it that you will not be able to counter. So you want to be smart about this and wait for the grounding totem to be put down, moonfire it, and then Cyclone. You can also Shadow Meld immediately as you get the proc to avoid being purged. You can clone off other CC so the Shaman is unable to react, and you can also outrange the Purge and then run in with the proc to bait the grounding, run back out, moonfire the totem, and then run back in to clone the Shaman. Also try to reapply your buff during downtime and Nature's Grasp just before proccing the rip, which will give you a couple of trash buffs and protect your proc. Overall, the mind games between Feral and Shaman require a lot of practice to get used to, but these are some strategies that have helped me. Another class that is surprisingly annoying is DK. DKs have a spell on a 1-minute cooldown called Dark Simulacrum, which puts a debuff on you that steals the next spell. As with Shamans, DKs will have the Weakauras telling them when you have the clone proc and immediately put this on you. Simply hold your first clone proc for a second and moonfire to get rid of the debuff and then Cyclone. There are times where you can spend 2 or 3 combo point Savage Roar to fish for clone procs, so don't always wait for 5 combo points in dire situations. You can just pray for good RNG and it might be able to save your team. Doing this is especially important against mage teams where you're going to be CC'd a lot and not have the opportunity to get a lot of combo points. Other classes such as mages and priests can also purge the proc, so be mindful of your trash buffs, and when you proc the clone, use LOS to your advantage to avoid purges and land the instant clones. And lastly, don't be afraid to hardcast Cyclone. A lot of the time, this can bait kicks and CC onto yourself, which will relieve pressure off the healer. If you're stuck in a Frost Nova or a Ring, it's much better to just spam Cyclone than to sit there and do nothing. Hibernate is a 7-second sleep effect that is only usable on enemy Feral Druids or Shamans in Ghost Wolf. Since it breaks on damage and can be dispelled, it is rarely a good choice to spend your instant proc on. However, in situations when you have cross CC on the healer, it can be a great CC on enemy Ferals because it does not DR with Cyclone. Bash is a 5-second stun on a 1-minute cooldown that requires Bear Form. Using this ability requires the investment of 3 globals to do, so using it at a bad time can impact your DPS. A good tip for Bash is that hunters can trap off it very easily due to it being a stun and keeping the target still, so you can coordinate this with your team. And also in Bear Form we have Bear Charge, which is super underrated. On a 15-second cooldown you can make a 3-second undispellable root on your target. This is really good at appealing classes like DK, Warrior and Rogue off your teammates. You can also follow it up with a casted Cyclone or root just outside their kick range. Even though, as I said before, Feral is passively the tankiest class in the game, you can still die. In cat form, you take 20% more healing, which is passively very useful, but under heavy pressure you're going to have to go into bear form. In bear form you take 18% less damage passively thanks to the natural reaction talent, and you have a ton of extra armor against physical damage. In bear form, you take 18% less damage passively thanks to the natural reaction talent, a ton of extra armor against physical damage, and also have access to frenzied regen. This ability essentially makes you unkillable for 20 seconds, but at the trade-off of doing basically 0 damage while it's active. Many rogue teams like to kill Feral in a kidney bomb in cat form when you have no trinket, so make sure you use your trinket wisely against rogue teams. Other teams will rarely focus the Feral, and if they do, just make sure you use your Bark Skin and Survival Instincts at high HP in order to stay in cat form as long as possible. You can live for a long time in bear form, but you will also do no damage and lose all your offensive pressure, so there is a trade-off there. Feral is a very tanky class, but at the cost of losing all offensive pressure if you're forced to sit in bear form. Make sure you're only in bear form when absolutely necessary. Alright, so here's a list of non-comp specific tips that many Feral players don't know or are underutilized. I will have more tips for comp specific strategies in future videos. Okay, so Thorns is a 20-second buff on a 45-second cooldown that makes the target deal some damage upon receiving a melee attack. This damage against 2 melees is actually extremely strong, and it is definitely worth putting this up just before going stealth and reapplying on cooldown versus any double melee comp. Nature's Grasp should be used about 15 seconds before the arena starts. This is so the buff lasts long enough to cover your first clone proc, and the cooldown will be up by then, so then you can use another one. Against Dispel comps, sit at 5 combo points and first use Nature's Grasp before your finisher to put Dispel protection on your proc. Stampeding Roar is very strong when combined with Paladin Freedom or Hunter Freedom, giving the target increased speed and immunity to slows. If you are playing Jungle Cleave, time these two together on your healer if they're being focused and they can race car away around a corner. Soothe can be used to remove enrage effects from a warrior. This will reduce his damage by 10% and prevents him from using enrage regeneration. Never use procs on entangling roots in 3v3. Roots are dispellable and most classes have a way to get out of it or still do damage while it's active. You are always better off cycloning. This advice also goes for Healing Touch. It heals for 12k and it wastes 2 globals and a proc. Only use procs for Cyclone and the occasional Hibernate in 3v3 if you have cross CC on the healer. In 2v2 and 1v1 situation, Roots and Heal can be effective sometimes. Okay, macros. Feral Druid is a particularly annoying class for macros because all of the forms you have, and as such you will need quite a lot of them. Fury Fire. This macro will allow you to Fury Fire no matter what form you're in with the same keybind. Swipe. This will cast Swipe in cat or bear form depending on which form you're in. Mangle. This is a start attack macro on Mangle. This will continue to begin auto-attacking the target immediately even if you don't have enough energy to use the Mangle. Arena 1-2-3. So this is my Arena 1-2-3 Cyclone macro. I also use the same thing for Entangling Roots and Hibernate. By default, this will CC Arena 1, and with Shift and Control modifiers will CC Arena 2 and Arena 3 respectively. Focus Kick. This is a Focus Kick macro, which by default will kick my target, and with the Control modifier will kick my focus target. This requires 2 different macros for Bear and Cat Kick. I have not figured out how to put it in one macro just yet. I have a few other abilities with the same type as macro, such as Focus Feral Charge and Focus Bash. Tiger's Fury. This macro will cast my Trinket at the same time as Tiger's Fury, so I can benefit from the strongest snapshot when applying Rip and Rake. Dash and Stampeding Roar. This macro will cancel Aura Stampeding Roar when I'm trying to dash. If you try to dash out of a route while Stampeding Roar is active, you will be unable to, so having a cancel Aura is extremely important, so you make sure you get yourself out of routes when you need to. The same thing is true for casting Stampeding Roar. You also want to then cancel dash. Stampeding Roar. This macro will cancel dash and use Stampeding Roar no matter if you are in cat or bear form with the same keybind. Decurse. This macro will remove curse from my mouse over, so I can hover over the raid frame and use this keybind to remove hex. Travel. This macro will cast Flight, Travel or Swim Form depending on whichever is the appropriate one in each context. It will Swim Form in water, Flight Form if Flight is available in that zone, and Travel Form otherwise. Okay, I have already made a video on my Weakauras, so I will only cover them very briefly here. The link to that video will be in the description. I don't make my own Weakauras, I got all of these by googling, so if you just take the name of the Weakaura or write what you want a Weakaura to do, I can almost guarantee that someone out there has made what you're looking for. Here we have the loss of control alert, which is just the retail CC indicator ported into Classic. This one is a simple energy bar that is active in cat form. These two white procs are my tailoring cloak proc and on-use trinket, so I can best snapshot my bleeds. This one is the Dark Simulacrum notifier I showed earlier in the video. And finally, this one shows me when a hunter is casting Scare Beast, so I can shift into caster form. Alright, if you've stuck around this long, I thank you for watching my video and I do hope you found this information helpful. I stream my games daily on YouTube and Twitch, so if that's something you're interested in, please send me a follow and a subscription, I would greatly appreciate it. If you have any questions or there's something I have not covered, please leave a comment below and I will get back to you. That's all I've got for this guide. My name is Light and I'll see you in the next one.